Hey guys, and welcome to my 2015 Cleveland Indians season preview. The Indians quietly have been really good the past 2 years. 2013 they won 92 games and lost in the wild card game, and last year they won 85 games and were in contention all summer. Although they haven't won a World Series since 1948, maybe this will be the year they change that. So as usual, we'll get to start off with the infielders, and start off with the catcher, Yan Gomes, who had a breakout season last year, hitting 21 home runs, I believe, and having a 787 OPS, I believe, and a 122 OPS plus. And he's pretty solid defensively as well. They definitely have a really good player there behind the plate. And he also won the Silver Slugger for catcher. So he really had a good breakout year last year for the Indians. Sort of came out of nowhere. At first, they have Carlos Santana, the former catcher, who draws a lot of walks. Last year, he walked 113 times, which is a lot, and he has really good power. He hit 27 home runs, I believe, and he's not that great defensively, but his offense should carry him. I mean, he doesn't hit for that high of an average, but I mean, considering all the walks that he draws, he still gets on base enough where it really doesn't matter, and he has the power too. So he's definitely a productive player over there at first. And then at second, you have Jason Kipnis, who had a bit of a down year last year. I think his breakout year in 2013 is maybe above what he will normally do, but I definitely think he's a solid player. I think he's the type of player that'll hit 260, maybe hit 10, 15 home runs, and play respectable defense and maybe steal a few bases throughout the year, and that's what I think he'll do this year after a bit of a down year last year. Then at short, you have Jose Ramirez, I believe his name is. He's a good defensive player, but he's really unproven, and he really hasn't. I think they have another guy. I forget what his name is, but they have another shortstop that's probably going to be the shortstop of the future. I don't think this guy is it. Then at third base, you have Lonnie Chisenhall, who is bad defensively and had a decent year offensively last year, but he's never really proven he can be consistent. So really the left side of the infield for this team is really questionable. It's really not all that great, but the right half is decent. Overall, this infield is respectable. It's passable for a contending team, but it's nothing that really blows your mind or anything. Then the outfield, you have Michael Brantley, who was probably the Indians' best position player, at least, on their team. He really broke out last year. He hit 327 and almost won the batting title. Martinez and Jose Altuve beat him in that category, though. And he had 7 wins above replacement, which is excellent. That's an MVP type season for him, and he was third in the MVP voting this year, or last year, excuse me. And he'll have decent power, hit 15, 20 home runs and a lot of doubles, and I think he's going to hit 300 for a bunch of years to come. I really like him, and he's an all-star type player, no doubt. So they're really looking good at left field. And then center field, they have a bit of a question mark. They're sort of big signing from a couple years ago, Michael Bourne. He really hasn't lived up to what he did previously in his career. His average is being even lower than what it was in Atlanta and Houston. And he really wasn't even that high an average guy before. He hit 270, 280 before. Now he's in the 250 range. But he plays great defense, and he'll steal some bases. He didn't even steal that many bases last year. He was really kind of not that great last year. But I'd imagine he's going to get back on track and at least steal 20 or 30 bases and be a respectable center fielder. You want a good defender out there, and he is a good defender. So yeah, he's definitely passable for a center fielder. And out and right, you have Brandon Moss, who was with the A's for the past 3 years, and he sort of came out of nowhere in 2012 and really impressed people with his numbers. And last year, his numbers were a little down, but I'd imagine they're going to creep back up a little bit. His average was in 230 range. He'll probably have a higher average now that he's getting away from the Oakland A's Coliseum, because that's definitely one of the more pitcher-friendly parks in all of baseball. So going to Cleveland and maybe playing in a weaker division, I would say. and will probably help his numbers. I think. I mean, he's an alright player. I've never really been that big a fan of him, other than 2012. He hasn't been like super great, but I mean, in this day and age, if you can get a guy who hits 25, 30 home runs and bats 240 or 250, you'll definitely take that production, because hitting is down and pitching's up. So, yeah, he's a decent player out there. And then at DH, you have Nick Swisher, who is, on a side note, one of the more annoying players in the whole league, in my opinion. But he also was horrible last year. His slash line was 208, 278, and 331, which is absolutely horrendous, especially since this medium market to small market team spent a decent amount of money on this guy a couple years ago. And I don't know if he's going to bounce back. I've never really been that big of a fan of him, to be honest. He's had a couple of good years, but I don't know. I don't really see him being all that great, to be honest. So yeah, so overall, the outfield and DH, I mean, the outfield is pretty solid, I think. But I mean, DH obviously. I don't like Nick Swisher very much, so yeah. But yeah, I'd say overall the outfield's pretty solid. So with overall, the position players are respectable. I mean, the left side of the infield is kind of a big question mark to me. And even second base is a little bit of a question mark, but I think Kipnis is a solid player. And in the outfield, you have two really good hitters and a good defensive player in Bourne. So I think position player-wise, they're pretty solid. And not to mention Yan Gomes. So, I mean, this team's going to probably be, top 15 in runs scored in all of Major League Baseball. I see this team scoring some runs, but not being a powerhouse offensively. So last year, Corey Kluber really broke out and became one of the better pitchers in the league. He won the Cy Young, and I think he's going to continue to do that. He had a 2.44 ERA last year and had a 10.3 strikeout per nine rate, which is excellent, especially for a starting pitcher. So I think he'll continue to build on his success from last year and be an ace for the Indians for years to come. And then their second starting pitcher, Carrasco, was sort of a breakout last year. He had a 9.4 K per nine, which is pretty solid again, and pretty decent ERA. So I think he's going to be a big part of their pitching this season. And the next couple of guys I'm going to talk about are young pitchers who are sort of unproven, but they have a lot of upside and could be the difference for this Indians team this year. First, talk about Trevor Bauer, who was a former Diamondbacks prospect who they got in a trade. He had his first full year last year, and he was decent. He wasn't spectacular, but if they can get a good season out of him, that would really be huge. And same with the next guy, Danny Salazar, who, again, had a respectable, decent rookie year last year. Wasn't amazing, but he was passable for a rotation role, and I think he's going to get better this year and progress in his skill. And yeah, so that's the 4 rotation spots that are pretty much, I think, are going to be in the Indians rotation throughout the whole year. And the 5th spot has a lot of, I don't know who's really going to take the spot. You have guys like T.J. House, he's a young arm, and I don't really see him continuing his success from last year. He had maybe a 3.5 ERA, I believe, and I don't really see him being all that great in his career. And you have Zach McAllister, who has never really been anything all that special, and then Josh Tillman, who is basically the same as McAllister. He's not really anything special. I mean, he had one pretty good year, but other than that, he's been mediocre or below average. And one of the more interesting players on the roster is Gavin Floyd, the former White Sox player. He's struggled with injuries the past few years, and just yesterday they decided to do an MRI on his elbow again, so he might be injured the whole year again. But if he can stay healthy and pitch, he's a solid pitcher, so that would definitely help this rotation if he could produce anything for this Indians team. So overall, this Indians rotation is really strong at the top, with Kluber and Carrasco being pretty solid pitchers, especially Kluber. He's a Cy Young contender, and he should be for years to come. And after that, you have sort of question marks with Trevor Bauer and Danny Salazar. I mean, they're young pitchers, and they really haven't been producers that much yet. I mean, they had decent rookie years, but they haven't become all-star type pitchers or Cy Young type pitchers yet. And the fifth spot is just a mess. I have no idea who they're going to have there. Let's hope that they can, avoid using a fifth starter as much as they can to begin the season, because a lot of teams do that because they have a lot of off days at the beginning of the season for some reason. But yeah, I think this Indians rotation is passable, especially at the top. But there are some question marks, no doubt, with this rotation. Let's transition to the bullpen and start talking about their closer, Cody Allen, who has been really good the past 2 years. He's had a 2.25 ERA with a 11.5 K per 9. So I definitely think they have their closer for years to come there. He's a really good young arm, and I expect him to continue to build on his success in the past 2 years. Then they have Brian Shaw, who's had a 3.1 ERA his whole career since 2011, since he came up with the Diamondbacks, and he's a solid, respectable pitcher out of the pen for them. Then you have Scott Atkinson, who's a veteran arm who's been solid the past 3 years with a 2.83 ERA and 3.23 strikeout to walk ratio, which is pretty good. So I expect those 3 arms to be the dominant pitchers out of their pen, but it goes a little downhill from here. So after those top 3 guys, you have a little bit of a drop off. Mark Renshbisky, I believe is how you say it. I have a hard time saying his name. He's a lefty. He used to play for the Cardinals and the Blue Jays. He is a decent player. I'm not too high on him, but he is respectable. And now we're going to get into the not respectable guys, like Nick Hagedorn, I believe his name is, and C.C. Lee, and Anthony Swarzak, who's always been awful, and Jeff Manship, who's always been awful. And the only other guy I want to mention, who's just, a lot of times I mention like 1 or 2 guys who are veterans who have been injured or having down year. The next factor in this bullpen could be Scott Downs, who was an excellent reliever for the Blue Jays and Angels in the mid-2000s, and I definitely think he could do something more so than a lot of the other guys I just mentioned. Yeah, I think that so overall, I think this bullpen is pretty good, especially the top 2 guys are good, but there's not much depth here. If one of those guys go down, which happens a lot in bullpens, or if something dumb happens, bullpens are fluky, like I've said a lot of times. I could see this bullpen not performing well this year. But if everything goes well, the top 3 guys are solid. So overall, I mean this bullpen's passable. I like it, especially the closer, Cody Allen. Overall, I think the Indians are probably going to be a middle of the pack team this year. There are a lot of question marks left side of the infield. Even Jason Kipnis, Michael Bourne with his stats steadily declining the past couple of years, and Nick Swisher being awful last year. This offense may not be all that great, even though they have some really good players out there like Brantley and Gomes and Santana and Moss. But yeah, and then the starting rotation is, after the first 2 spots, is sort of questionable. You're not really sure what you're going to get out of guys like Bauer or Salazar or anyone in the 5th spot. And then the bullpen is sort of lacking in depth, but is strong at the top. So, they're going to have a respectable team. I think this is a team that's probably going to finish somewhere between 78 wins and 82 wins, which would be a winning record. I'll go in the middle there and say 79 wins. That may seem kind of low, but I'm not really high on the Indians this year. I just look at their roster, and I'm not, I don't think they're awful, but I'm not really super impressed with it, to be honest. So, yeah, that's my opinion on the Indians this year. I think that they'll be respectable at least, but I don't see them making the playoffs or anything this year. The next video I'll do is the Chicago White Sox, the second team I'm going to do in the AL Central. And thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to talk discuss about what I talked about today. Leave a comment if you liked it at all. And if you enjoy my baseball talk content, subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it. I like knowing that people are at least looking at my stuff and maybe at least somewhat enjoying it. So thanks for watching, everybody.